Under the crimson veil of the blood moon, shadows whispered secrets that no wolf's heart could bear. Ilara's breath fogged the frigid air as she stumbled through the snow-swept pines, the bite of winter clawing at her skin like the rejection that had torn her from the pack. The Omega's world had shattered in the span of a single howl, banished, marked as unworthy, her scent now a curse to those who once called her kin. The alpha of her old pack, a brute named Thorn, had claimed another mate under the same moon that now bled red above, his eyes cold as the ice encrusting the ancient oaks. "You are no longer of us," he had growled, his fangs bared in the firelight of the gathering circle. They had stripped her of her furs, leaving her in threadbare rags that whipped against her legs in the relentless wind. No ceremony, no mercy, just the raw sting of exile, a death sentence wrapped in the silence of falling snow. The forest stretched endlessly, a labyrinth of white and shadow under the moon's sanguine glow. Ilara's bare feet bled into the powder, each step a crimson bloom that the wind scattered like forgotten prayers. She clutched the pendant at her throat, the one relic she had hidden from their grasping claws, a silver crescent moon encrusted with a single dried drop of blood, her mother's last gift before the fever claimed her. It pulsed warm against her chilled flesh, as if alive, a talisman against the despair gnawing at her bones. What strength was there in an Omega's tears? The Deusa had whispered of destinies woven in moonlight, but tonight all Ilara felt was the void, the howl of isolation echoing in her chest. Wind howled through the branches, carrying distant weavos that twisted her gut, pursuers perhaps, or merely the wild's lament. She had fled the pack's territory at dusk, the red moon rising like a wound in the sky, painting the snow in hues of rust and fire. The air smelled of pine resin and iron, the metallic tang of her own blood mingling with the earth's frozen breath. Her body ached, not just from the cold seeping into her marrow, but from the deeper wound, the mate bond that had never formed, the rejection that branded her soul. Omegas were meant to heal, to bind, but she? She was the fracture, the one cast aside like a broken blade. Collapsing against a jagged rock, Ilara pressed her palm to the snow, watching her blood seep into it, staining the white purity. Memories flooded her, childhood romps in summer meadows, now buried under this eternal winter, the alpha's brief glance of pity before turning away, his new mate's triumphant snarl. Why her? The question burned hotter than any hearth fire. She had served faithfully, her quiet strength mending quarrels and soothing the young. Yet Thorn saw weakness in her silence, a threat to his reign in these turbulent times of border skirmishes and whispered betrayals. Packs warred under the moon's watchful eye, alphas rising and falling like tides, and an Omega without a bond was expendable, a liability in the games of power. The pendant warmed again, almost imperceptibly, as if responding to her anguish. Ilara traced its edges, the blood-drop ruby at its center catching the moonlight in a flicker of deep red. Her mother had called it the heart of the moon, a symbol of hidden paths and unspoken fates. "It will guide you when the pack turns blind," she had said, her voice fading into coughs. Now, in this forsaken wilderness, Ilara wondered if it was just another lie, a pretty stone to mock her solitude. The wind carried a low rumble, not thunder, but the distant thunder of paws on snow. Her heart pounded, a frantic drum against her ribs. Were they coming to finish what exile began? Or was it something worse, the shadows that slunk beyond the tree line, eyes gleaming like embers in the night? She rose, legs trembling, and pressed on, the forest closing around her like a lover's indifferent embrace. Flakes swirled in eddies, veiling the path, but the moon pierced through, its red light a beacon or a hunter's lure. Ilara's mind raced with fragments of lore. The Deusa's children, wolves born of starlight and blood, destined to find redemption in the unlikeliest unions. But redemption felt distant, a tale for those with packs to return to. Her own story was one of unraveling, thread by thread, until only the pendant remained, a tether to what she had lost. As the night deepened, the air grew thicker with the scent of smoke, faint but acrid, carried on the gale. A fire? A camp? Or the pyre of some other outcast? Alara's instincts warred, flee deeper into the unknown, or seek warmth in the peril. The pendant burned against her skin now, insistent, as if urging her forward. She whispered to the moon, her voice lost in the wind. What is mercy, if not the choice to endure? No answer came, only the relentless howl, pulling her toward whatever fate awaited in the crimson shadows. The trees thinned ahead, revealing a frozen river glinting like a vein of silver under the blood moon. Alara paused, breath ragged, her bloodied footprints a trail of defiance in the snow. Something stirred across the water, a shape massive and wounded, its silhouette etched against the tree line. A wolf? No, larger. Cloaked in darkness, the scent of alpha power mingling with the sharp bite of fresh blood. Her pulse quickened, fear and an inexplicable pull twisting within her. The pendant thrummed, alive with secrets, as the figure turned, eyes catching the moonlight in a blaze of gold. The figure across the frozen river uncoiled with a predator's grace, its form resolving from shadow into stark reality under the blood moon's unrelenting gaze. He was no mere wanderer, a colossal presence, broad-shouldered and cloaked in a mantle torn by claw and frost, the fabric dark with stains that spoke of violence. Blood, fresh and metallic, scented the air like a siren's call, mingling with the pine and ice that clung to Alara's nostrils. His eyes, those golden flames, locked onto hers, piercing the veil of swirling snow as if he could unravel her secrets with a single glance. An Alpha King, she knew it instinctively, the weight of his aura pressing against her like the wind's icy fist, commanding, broken, laced with the sorrow of one who had tasted too much power and found it ash. Alara's heart stuttered, a wild rhythm against the chill invading her chest. She should run. The river's cracked ice gleamed like a treacherous promise, and the pendant at her throat burned hotter, its ruby heart pulsing in time with her fear. But her feet rooted to the snow, traitors to her survival. Who was he? The rumors of the northern packs whispered of kings in exile, alphas dethroned by betrayal, or the Deusa's cruel whim. This one moved with the limp of fresh wounds, his right arm cradled close, the metallic tang sharpening as he took a step forward. A low growl rumbled from his throat, not threat, but pain, echoing the distant weavos that haunted the night. "Vampire!" he snarled, the words slicing through the wind like a blade, his voice gravel-rough, laced with the authority of thrones long contested. His nostrils flared, scenting her, or what he thought he scented. Alara's blood ran colder than the river. How? She was no vampire, not truly. Her secret was a blade's edge she walked, a spy's guise woven into her omega blood by the shadowed coven that had claimed her loyalty years ago. The pendant, her mother's gift, was no mere talisman. It hid her dual nature, the vampiric venom that coursed faintly in her veins, a heritage from a forbidden union, masked by wolf's fur and moon's grace. But under this red moon, with her wounds bleeding freely, the veil thinned. He smelled the otherness, the iron beneath her howl. She recoiled, the snow crunching under her shift, her rags fluttering like surrender flags. "Stay back," she whispered, though her voice carried no conviction, only the raw edge of curiosity warring with terror. The Alpha paused at the river's edge, his golden eyes narrowing, the moonlight catching the scar that bisected his jaw, a mark of old battles, perhaps the very guilt that hollowed his gaze. He was King Draven, she realized with a jolt, the fallen ruler of the Silverfang realm, whispered to be cursed by his own mate's betrayal, his pack shattered in a war of fangs and lies. The coven had sent her to infiltrate such fractures, to whisper poison into ears of power, but this was no calculated step. This was the moon's jest, pulling her toward the one wolf who could expose her. He tested the ice with a booted foot, the crack echoing like a bone snap. But he pressed on, each step deliberate, the mantle parting to reveal armor dented and bloodied, a sword hilt glinting at his side. "You reek of death's kin," he growled, crossing halfway, the river groaning beneath him. "Spy or scavenger, Omega, the moon reveals all tonight." His words struck like thorns, instinctive recognition blooming between them, a pull deeper than scent, a thread of the deuce's weaving that tugged at her core. Mate? No, impossible. She was exile, tainted. He was king, marked by the weight of fallen crowns. Yet her body betrayed her, a warmth uncoiling low in her belly, defying the fear that screamed to flee. Ilara's hand flew to the pendant, clutching it as if it could anchor her fracturing resolve. The ruby warmed, almost soothing, its blood-drop core flickering like a hidden flame. "I am no spy," she lied, the words tasting of ash, her eyes darting to the tree line where shadows might hide her escape. But curiosity held her, that forbidden spark. What wound drove a king to this frozen verge? His face, etched with lines of regret, softened fractionally as he neared the far bank, the wind whipping his dark hair across features both fierce and haunted. Guilt clung to him like the blood on his cloak. She sensed it, an Omega's gift, the empathy that had once mended packs now piercing his armor. He had lost everything she knew, his queen's treachery in league with vampire lords, borders breached under crimson skies, his howls unanswered in the night. Draven halted mere paces from her, towering yet vulnerable, his breath clouding the air in ragged bursts. Up close, the scent of him overwhelmed, alpha musk, pine smoke, and the sharp copper of wounds that wept from gashes across his chest, visible through the rent fabric. "Then what brings you to this forsaken vein?" he demanded, but his voice cracked, the gold in his eyes dimming with exhaustion. No command, only a weary probe, as if her presence stirred something long dormant. Ilara met his stare, the connection igniting like embers in frost, instinctive, undeniable, born of shared isolation. Fear coiled in her gut. She was a spy, her fangs a secret sharper than any rejection, yet his pain mirrored hers, a echo of exile under the same bleeding moon. She stepped back, the snow yielding softly, her bloodied feet leaving prints that the wind began to erase. "Survival," she murmured, the word a half-truth, her curiosity blooming despite the denial screaming in her mind. He was no savior, she no redeemer. But as he extended a hand, scarred and trembling, the pendant thrummed in rhythm with his pulse, the air thick with unspoken fates. The red moon watched, silent witness, as the space between them narrowed, fear and pull entwining like vines in the snow. And now, I invite you to leave a trace of your presence in the comments. Tell us where in the world you're watching from, and the exact hour you hear this story. We wish to know how far these northern confessions travel, and at what moments of the night they find you. The wind howled like a betrayed lover as Draven's hand hung in the frozen air between them, scarred fingers splayed in a gesture that was neither command nor plea, but something rawer, a bridge forged from shared ruin. Ilara's pulse thundered in her ears, drowning the distant weavos that slithered through the pines. Warnings of pursuit closing in from the shadowed borders. The red moon bled its light across the ice, turning the river into a mirror of fractured destinies, and in that crimson reflection she saw them both, exiles under the same curse, their scents entwining like smoke from a dying fire. Fear clawed at her throat, the vampiric whisper in her blood urging flight. But the pendant at her neck pulsed with insistent warmth, its ruby heart drawing her toward him as if the Dusa herself tugged the threads. I offer no threat, Draven murmured, his voice a low rumble that vibrated through the snow, golden eyes softening from suspicion to weary recognition. Up close, the lines of his face told tales of battles lost, not just flesh, but soul-deep gashes from a queen's betrayal, her alliance with vampire shadows that had razed his halls and scattered his pack like leaves in a gale. He was no monster, this fallen king. Guilt etched his brow like frost on stone, a melancholy weight that mirrored her own rejection. Alara hesitated, her bare feet numb in the powder, the metallic tang of her wounds sharpening as adrenaline surged. Survival demanded caution, yet instinct, the Omega's buried gift, sensed no malice, only a kindred fracture, a howl silenced by the world's indifference. A sharp crack split the night, not from the ice, but from the tree line beyond the river. Shadows detached from the pines, sleek forms loping with predatory silence. Thorn's hunters, their eyes gleaming with feral hunger under the moon's red gaze. Alara's breath hitched. They had come not just for her, but for any weakness in these border wilds, packs warring like wolves over scraps of power. Draven's head snapped toward the sound, his body coiling despite the limp, hand dropping to the sword at his belt. "They're upon us," he growled, the alpha fire reigniting in his stance. "Run with me, or stand and fall alone." She didn't think. Instinct propelled her forward as he lunged across the final stretch of ice, his arm snaking around her waist in a grip that was iron and desperation. They bolted into the thickening forest, the snow yielding under frantic steps, her rags tearing further against low branches that clawed like jealous fingers. The pendant bounced against her chest, its warmth a steady beacon amid the chaos, while Draven's scent enveloped her, pine smoke and blood, a shield against the cold that seeped into her bones. Behind them, Weavos rose in chorus, close now, the thud of paws shaking the earth like war drums. Bullets of fear pierced her mind. Exposure, not just as exile, but as the coven's shadow, her fangs a secret that could doom them both. Yet in his stride beside her, empathy stirred, unbidden, a glimpse of the king who had spared traitors in his mercy, only to be undone by it. The chase blurred into a frenzy of white and shadow, breath burning in their lungs, the red moon mocking their flight with its unyielding watch. Draven veered sharply, pulling her into a narrow ravine where ancient rocks jutted like the ribs of some colossal beast long buried in ice. "Here!" he rasped, shoving aside a veil of frozen vines to reveal a cave mouth, its depths exhaling a faint, musty warmth. They tumbled inside, the entrance narrowing just enough to bar the larger wolves, and Alara collapsed against the rough wall, chest heaving, the air thick with the scent of damp stone and their mingled sweat. Outside, the hunters' snarls echoed, circling like vultures, but the stone muffled their fury, granting a fragile sanctuary. In the dim glow filtering from the entrance, crimson-tinged moonlight dancing on jagged crystals, Draven slumped beside her, his massive frame shuddering as the adrenaline ebbed. Blood seeped from his wounds anew, staining the cave floor in dark rivulets that mirrored the pendant's ruby core. Alara's gaze traced the gashes, empathy blooming like a hesitant flame. She knew that pain, the rejection that festered deeper than flesh. Without a word, she tore a strip from her ragged hem, pressing it to his chest with trembling hands. He stiffened, golden eyes locking onto hers, surprise flickering through the guilt that shadowed them. "Why?" he whispered, voice rough as gravel, the question hanging heavy in the confined space. The touch ignited something primal, a spark that leaped from her fingers to his skin, the Omega's healing instinct surfacing despite her secrets. The pendant warmed against her throat, as if approving, its blood-drop essence thrumming in harmony with his slowing pulse. "Because mercy is the only crown left to us," she replied softly, her voice echoing the philosophy her mother had etched into her soul. What was strength, if not choosing to bind wounds in the dark? Draven's hand covered hers, calloused and warm, holding the makeshift bandage in place. In that moment, the cave shrank to the space between them, the outside world's howls fading to a distant murmur. His scent wrapped around her like a mantle, alpha power tempered by vulnerability, and she felt the bond stir, not the instant blaze of mates, but a slow thaw, curiosity weaving into trust. He searched her face, nostrils flaring subtly, catching the faint undercurrent of her hidden nature, the vampiric veil thinning in the stress of flight. Yet he said nothing, only nodded, a silent acknowledgement of shared peril. "I've lost a pack to shadows like those," he confessed, his voice low, laced with the melancholy of a king unthroned. "Betrayed by one I called queen, her whispers opening gates to blood drinkers who feast on our borders." Alara's heart clenched, the coven's handiwork, her own unwitting thread in that tapestry of deceit. Guilt twisted in her gut, sharp as fangs, but his gaze held no accusation, only the raw honesty of a soul seeking redemption. Empathy deepened, turning fear to a fragile tether. She saw the ethical war in him, the duty that chained his heart, and in turn, he glimpsed her quiet strength, the Omega fire banked but unquenched. As the hunters' voices receded, circling futilely before the wind carried them onward, the cave's silence wrapped them like a shroud. Draven's head leaned back against the stone, eyes half-lidded, but his thumb traced a gentle circle on her wrist, a bond forming in the refuge's hush, empathy forging links stronger than iron. Alara withdrew her hand slowly, the pendant cooling as if sated, yet the warmth lingered in her veins, a promise of revelations yet to come. Outside, the red moon waned toward dawn, but within, under the weight of unspoken truths, the first threads of destiny wove tighter, pulling them from isolation toward an uncertain union. What price would this refuge demand, when secrets bled into the light? The cave's hush deepened as dawn's first pallor clawed at the crimson edges of the retreating moon, casting elongated shadows that danced like specters across the jagged walls. Alara sat huddled against the stone, her body a map of aches, feet raw from the snow's bite, limbs heavy with the night's frantic flight. Yet it was the warmth of Draven's proximity that unsettled her most, his broad frame a silent sentinel mere inches away, his breathing steady now, laced with the faint rhythm of healing wounds. The pendant rested heavy against her chest, its ruby core dulled in the dim light, but she felt its pulse sinking with her own, a secret heartbeat urging truths she dared not voice. Outside, the wind whispered through the pines, carrying the faint, acrid scent of distant smoke, perhaps the hunter's failed pyre, or the coven's shadowed rites encroaching on wolf lands. Refuge had bought them time, but time was a thief, stealing illusions of safety. Draven shifted, his golden eyes opening to slits, reflecting the faint glow like embers in ash. He watched her without speaking. The air between them thick with unspoken questions, his guilt a tangible weight that pressed against her Omega senses. She had bandaged him, touched him with a mercy born of her fractured soul, and now regret gnawed at her. For the lie of her nature, the vampiric venom coiled in her blood like a serpent in wait. The coven had forged her into a blade, her mother's pendant the sheath that hid the edge, allowing her to infiltrate packs under the guise of a lowly Omega. But here, in this stone womb, the disguise frayed, her wounds from the exile reopening to weep not just blood, but the faint, iridescent sheen of her dual heritage. What was strength, if not the courage to conceal one's shadows? A low groan escaped him, his hand pressing to the gash across his chest where her rag-bound cloth had soaked through. Pain etched his features, deeper than flesh. The betrayal of his queen, her alliance with vampire lords that had spilled rivers of wolf blood under similar red moons. "The curse clings," he murmured, voice rough as grinding stone, his gaze distant, fixed on the cave's mouth where moonlight bled into gray. She bound me with their venom, a shadow that devours my howls, scatters my pack's remnants like frost in the gale. No Alpha's claim can break it. The Deusa turns her face from kings who falter. His words hung heavy, a confession wrung from isolation, and Alara's heart twisted, empathy surging unbidden. She knew that venom's bite, the coven's gift that amplified her senses, sharpened her fangs in the night, but also hollowed the soul, turning loyalty to ash. The pendant flared then, sudden and fierce, its ruby igniting like a drop of molten blood against her skin. Heat bloomed through her veins, chasing the chill, and Alara gasped, clutching it as visions assailed her. Flashes of silver-fanged wolves clashing with pale shadows in moonlit glades. Draven's form wreathed in ethereal chains, his golden eyes dimmed by despair. It was no mere trinket. Her mother's lore had hinted at its power, a lunar artifact infused with ancient blood magic, awakening only in the presence of destined fractures. The air hummed, charged with an otherworldly scent, ozone and wildflowers crushed under iron boots, and Alara's vision sharpened, her pupils dilating to slits, the vampiric gift merging with her omega empathy in a torrent she could no longer stem. She reached out instinctively, her palm hovering over his wound, and the cave seemed to contract, the crystals in the walls pulsing with faint prismatic light. "Let me," she whispered, her voice laced with a timbre not wholly her own, resonant and ancient, as if the Deusa spoke through her throat. Draven's eyes widened, locking onto hers, but he did not pull away. Curiosity and desperation warred in his stare, the Alpha's pride yielding to the pull of fate. Her fingers brushed his skin, and power surged. A cool rush like moonlight on snow mingled with the warm sting of blood. The gash knit before their eyes, threads of shadow unraveling from his flesh, the venom's curse coiling out like smoke to dissipate in the air. He inhaled sharply, a shudder rippling through his massive frame, the weight of years lifting as color returned to his cheeks, his aura flaring bright once more. "What are you?" Draven breathed, his hand capturing her wrist, not in restraint but reverence, golden eyes blazing with realization. The connection deepened, a visceral thread snapping into place. The mate bond he had thought forever severed, now igniting not in passion's blaze, but in redemption's quiet fire. He saw it then, in the depths of her gaze, the key to his destiny, the Omega whose hidden blood bridged worlds, capable of mending what vampires had torn asunder. The pendant glowed steadily now, its ruby syncing with his renewed pulse, a symbol of the union the moon had ordained. Alara recoiled inwardly, terror mingling with the thrill. Her gift had betrayed her, revealing the spy's shadow beneath the healer's light. The coven would call it treason, her pack exile amplified to damnation. Yet in his touch, she felt the first stir of acceptance, a balm to her rejection's scar. The wind outside rose to a mournful howl, Weavos echoing from the borders, Thorn's hunters regrouping, or worse, the coven's agents drawn by the surge of power. Draven rose, pulling her with him, his strength restored, mantle falling around them like a shared shroud. "You are the Pathfinder," he said, voice steady with newfound purpose. The melancholy lifting like fog from a thawing river. "The Deuce is chosen to shatter my chains, to reclaim what was lost. But this gift, it marks you as more than Omega." His fingers traced the pendant, awe softening the guilt in his eyes, yet a shadow lingered. The moral precipice of trusting one, touched by the enemy he despised. Ilara met his gaze, her heart a storm of fear and fragile hope, the revelation binding them tighter even as it threatened to unravel all. Blood and moonlight had spoken. Now choice loomed, a blade's edge between destiny and deception. In the cave's awakening light, as secrets bled into dawn, Draven's hand lingered on hers, the world beyond stirring with the promise of confrontation. What mercy could crown a king when his Redeemer bore fangs in the night? Subscribe if you believe mercy can crown even the fallen. The dawn's gray pallor seeped into the cave like a thief's whisper, turning the crimson remnants of the red moon into faded scars on the stone walls. Ilara's skin prickled with the chill that followed revelation, her hand still tingling from the power that had surged through her veins, mending Draven's wounds and unraveling the venom's curse. The pendant hung heavy now, its ruby core a smoldering ember against her throat, as if sated yet watchful, a silent judge in the fragile bond they had forged. His golden eyes held hers, no longer dimmed by shadow, but alight with a fierce clarity that both thrilled and terrified her, the recognition of a king reborn and the unspoken question of her hidden fangs. Outside, the wind carried the low rumble of approaching thunder, not storm, but pause. The pack's inexorable pull dragging their pasts into collision. Draven rose fully, his frame towering once more with the Alpha's unyielding grace, the mantle settling around his shoulders like a reclaimed crown. "We cannot hide forever," he said, his voice a resonant growl that echoed the cave's depths, laced with the melancholy of duties long evaded. "Thorn's hunters will circle back, and my scattered kin. They wait for a sign, a howl to rally against the shadows that devoured us." Ilara's heart clenched, the Omega's empathy flooding her with visions of his fall, the Queen's treacherous whispers to vampire lords, borders breached in nights of blood and fire, his howls unanswered as the Silverfang pack fractured under betrayal's blade. She was part of that darkness, her coven's venom the very thread that had woven his ruin. Yet his gaze held no accusation, only the ethical war of a leader torn between vengeance and the mercy she had shown him. She stood, legs unsteady on the uneven floor, the scent of damp earth and healing blood thick in the air. The revelation had stripped her bare. Her gift, the Pathfinder's light, had exposed the spy's shadow lurking beneath. Freedom whispered temptation, flee into the wilds, vanish before the coven claimed her as lost, before Draven's pack turned her exile into execution. But the pendant warmed insistently, its blood-drop pulse sinking with the distant Weavos rising like a chorus of judgment. Love, or what stirred in its place, was no gentle thaw. It was a forge, demanding she choose between the deception that had sustained her and the redemption that beckoned in his scarred touch. What was forgiveness, if not the blade that cut deepest into one's own soul? They emerged from the cave into a world reborn in pale light, the snow blanketed thicker now, muffling the crunch of their steps as they crested the ravine's rim. The forest loomed, pines heavy with frost, their branches clawing at the sky like supplicants to the fading moon. Draven's hand brushed hers, a fleeting anchor, but tension coiled in his frame, the Alpha sensing the convergence, scents of rival packs mingling on the wind like warring incense. Thorn's hunters had not retreated, their trails looped back, joined now by the acrid tang of smoke and iron, Vampire's cold pursuit slinking from the shadowed east. Ilara's senses sharpened, the vampiric gift awakening fully, her vision piercing the veil to reveal forms in the mist. Thorn's brute silhouette at the fore, his new mate's snarls echoing betrayal, and behind them, pale figures with eyes like polished obsidian, the coven's enforcers drawn by the surge of her power. The confrontation erupted without preamble, a whirlwind of snow and fury as Thorn's pack burst from the tree line, fangs bared under the dawn's reluctant glow. "Traitor King!" Thorn bellowed, his voice a thunderclap that shook the flakes from the branches, his eyes locking on Draven with the hunger of a rival claiming scraps. "You've crawled from your grave to steal our borders, and with this whelp, an Omega reject, reeking of the undead?" His gaze shifted to Ilara, narrowing in recognition, the rejection's sting fresh in his snarl. She felt it anew, the pack's disdain like icy barbs, stripping her of the fragile warmth Draven had kindled. But the pendant flared, its ruby igniting a defiant spark, reminding her of the rebirth that rejection had sown. Draven stepped forward, his presence a wall of unyielding steel, golden eyes blazing as his scattered kin emerged from the underbrush. Loyal remnants, gaunt and fierce, their howls joining his in a symphony of reclaimed power. "No theft, Thorn," he countered, voice steady as ancient stone, the guilt in his tone tempered by purpose. "Only justice for the shadows you court unknowingly. The vampires whisper in your ear as they did in mine. Your new mate's blood runs cold." The words hung like a gauntlet, and chaos ignited. Wolves clashed in a maelstrom of fur and claw. Snow churned to bloody slush under the onslaught, weavos piercing the air like shattered glass. Ilara dodged a lunging hunter, her body moving with unnatural grace, the vampiric speed saving her from fangs that sought her throat. In the fray's heart, the Coven's agents struck, pale blades flashing, their venom-laced strikes felling wolves with whispers of eternal night. One closed on Draven, a lithe shadow with eyes like frozen voids, her hand extended in mocking kinship. "Sister," the vampire hissed, scenting Ilara's heritage through the melee. "The Coven calls you home. This wolf's delusion ends now." The word twisted like a knife. Sister, a chain to the life of deceit that had orphaned her soul. Draven whirled, his sword cleaving the air, but Ilara froze, the moral precipice yawning beneath her. Freedom meant siding with the shadows, dooming the king who had seen her worth. Love, resisted and raw, demanded she turn. Expose the Coven's rot. Forgive the Pack's blindness in a war of forgiveness or annihilation. She chose, the pendant's heat surging as she lunged, her hidden fangs grazing the vampire's arm, not to kill, but to draw the venom forth, a mercy that burned her own throat with its bitterness. The agent recoiled, shrieking as her essence unraveled in the dawn's light, the Coven's illusion cracking like thin ice. Thorn faltered, his mate's true nature revealed in her pallid recoil, the Pack's howls turning to betrayal's roar. Draven's blade met Thorn's in a clash of sparks, but he spared the fatal strike, golden eyes meeting the rivals in a gaze of weary compassion. "End this," he urged, voice cutting through the din. "War feeds the true enemy. Mercy rebuilds what blood destroys." The battle ebbed as Thorn yielded, his form slumping in the reddened snow, the rival alpha's pride shattered by truth's unrelenting weight. Ilara collapsed beside Draven, breath ragged, the pendant cooling against her bloodied skin, its ruby a witness to the choice that bound her irrevocably. Yet doubt lingered, a spiritual thorn. Had she traded one chain for another, her spy's freedom for a love that demanded her full unveiling? The wind sighed through the pines, carrying the scent of thawing earth and distant fire as Draven's hand found hers amid the fallen. In his touch, redemption flickered, but the ethical shadow of war's cost loomed, a question etched in blood. Could forgiveness crown them both? Or would destiny demand one final sacrifice under the moon's unforgiving eye? The snow lay heavy with the weight of fallen foes, a crimson tapestry under the dawn's encroaching light, where the red moon's last echoes bled into the horizon like a fading wound. Ilara's breath came in shallow gasps, her body trembling not from the cold that clawed at her exposed skin, but from the seismic shift within, the choice she had made, fangs bared in mercy rather than malice, unraveling the Coven's veil in a single, searing act. The pendant at her throat pulsed with a final, insistent warmth, its ruby core absorbing the metallic tang of spilled blood, as if drinking in the chaos to forge something new. Around them, the forest held its breath, pines standing sentinel over the battlefield's hush, the wind whispering through branches like the Deuce's reluctant approval. Draven knelt beside her, his golden eyes searching her face amid the settling flakes, the alpha's strength now a steady anchor rather than a looming shadow. His hand, scarred and warm, cupped her cheek, thumb tracing the line of a fresh cut from the fray. where vampire venom had grazed her arm before she turned it back on its source. The touch ignited no blaze, no instant claiming under the moon's gaze, but a slow infusion of acceptance, resisted for so long in her heart's shadowed corners. He had seen her truth, the spy's fangs hidden beneath the Omega's quiet grace, the dual blood that bridged worlds and broke them. Yet in his gaze, there was no rejection, only the melancholy depth of a king who knew guilt's bite all too well. "You chose us," he murmured, voice rough as the earth beneath them, laced with the wonder of one redeemed. "Not the shadows that birthed you, but the light that mends." Alara's chest tightened, empathy flooding her like a river thawed by spring's first fire. She saw the fragments of his past in that look, the queen's betrayal, her pale whispers opening gates to slaughter, the Silverfang Pack's howls silenced in nights of fire and frost. Her own role in that tapestry haunted her, the Coven's assignments threading poison into packs like his, her mother's pendant, the only tether to a purer path. Rejection had been her exile's gift, stripping away illusions, forcing her to confront the moral chasm, power in deception or compassion in unveiling. The battle's toll lay stark. Thorn's form slumped in defeat, his new mate dragged away by remnants of her kind, their alliance shattered like brittle ice. Wolves from both packs circled warily, scents mingling in uneasy truce, the air thick with the iron of blood and the faint, acrid smoke of dying embers from a hunter's abandoned torch. She rose unsteadily, Draven's arm steadying her, the pendant swinging like a pendulum between them, its blood-drop ruby catching the first rays of sun piercing the canopy. Freedom had been her phantom, chased through exiles and lies, but here, in the wreckage of choice, it reshaped into something fiercer. Rebirth. Not as a lone Omega or shadowed spy, but as the pathfinder the Diusa had hidden in her veins. "I chose you," she whispered, the words tasting of ash and renewal, her hand covering his on her cheek. The vampiric chill in her blood warred with the Omega's warmth, but in his touch they converged, a union forged not in passion's rush, but in the quiet sacrifice of truths laid bare. No crown of power tempted her now. Compassion was the throne she claimed, forgiving the pack's blindness as Draven forgave her fangs. The wind stirred, carrying distant weavos, loyal kin answering Draven's renewed call, emerging from the wilds like ghosts reclaiming form. Thorn lifted his head, eyes hollow with the rival's defeat, the brute's pride yielding to the ethical weight of Draven's mercy. "What now, fallen king?" he rasped, voice cracking like the ice underfoot, his packmates shifting uneasily, sense of fear and respect intertwining. Draven's gaze swept the gathering, his melancholy lifting into resolve, the Alpha's aura flaring like dawn's gold on snow. "We rebuild," he declared, the words echoing with spiritual gravity, not with vengeance's blade, but the bonds that heal. The vampire's shadows retreat, but only if we stand as one, wolf and hidden kin alike. Ilara felt the shift in the air, a spiritual tide turning, the pendant cooling to a steady glow, as if the moon herself nodded from her descent. Her rebirth was no gentle awakening. It demanded the sacrifice of her old self, the spy's cunning traded for the healer's light, the Coven's chains severed in the act of mercy that had felled their agent. Draven turned to her then, his free hand lifting the pendant gently, fingers brushing her pulse where wolf and vampire beat as one. "Claim me as your mate," he said, not as command but invitation, golden eyes reflecting the ethical fire of their union. Under this moon's witness, let redemption bind what fate has woven. Tears traced warm paths down her cheeks, mingling with the snow's melt as she nodded, the resistance crumbling like frost in sunlight. Their lips met in the dawn's embrace, not a blaze, but a sealing, blood and moonlight fusing in a kiss that tasted of salt and pine, guilt absolved in the curve of shared breath. The packs howled in unison, a chorus of Renacimento, the forest alive with the scent of thawing earth and blooming possibility. Ilara's heart, once fractured by rejection, now pulsed whole, the pendant a symbol of the cure they had wrought together, love as proof, not prize, crowning them in the Deuce's quiet grace. Yet as the sun climbed, casting long shadows over the bloodied snow, a whisper of doubt lingered in Ilara's soul. Destiny versus the liberty she had glimpsed in flight. Had she truly chosen freedom, or merely traded one hierarchy for another's warmth? Draven's arm encircled her, a vow against the unknown, and in that hold she found her answer. Strength in Mercy's choice, rebirth in the union that transcended fangs and fur. The red moon had set, but its light endured in their eyes. A beacon for the wars yet to come, where compassion would be their sharpest weapon. If your heart beat alongside ours, like, comment, and subscribe. Because every soul that joins our moon keeps the flame of redemption alive.